Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. As I've said in my last video, all the rear suspension parts for the Firebird have come in, and I finally had a chance to start working on it. Uh, as always, this is the first time I've ever done leaf springs, so it was a learning experience. So I did the passenger side just to get acquainted on the process, and gonna get ready to do the driver's side. I decided to do this way backwards so I can go over a couple of things before I go to the other side. First, and the most important in my mind, is the gas tank. If you have the original rubber bushings in the back where the shackles are, you really, if you can get rid of the gas tank, drop it, because those things get stuck in there, and with the gas tank in the way, it turns into a real process. I was able to do it without the gas tank out of the way, and it turned into a pain. I mean, a couple of the bushings up on the frame end were caked in there, so it took forever with a small C-clamp and a socket to push it through all the way out. Which would have been easier if the gas tank wasn't in the way. I would have punched it straight out and it would have come out. Same way during installation, it just gets to be a pain. So I know a lot of people say you can do it with a gas tank in, and you can, but it takes so much longer. Unfortunately, I had like a full gas tank and no way to empty it, so I kept the gas tank in place. Second thing is, if you can have somebody to give you a hand, make life so much easier. Again, I did it by myself, and it was a bear, especially putting it back in. It just was an absolute nightmare, especially trying to get the bolts in at the shackle end with one person trying to make sure everything works. So either way, the thing is in. I got all new hardware for the sway bar bushings. Also, the kit came with all new hardware for the leaf spring pad, and then came with new hardware for the leaf spring bucket in the front. So on this side, I've tightened everything except the bushings on either end of the leaf spring. Those stay relatively loose until put the wheels on, and then you shake shake the car up and down a couple times just so everything settles, and then you can tighten it. Also, I have the shock in, but when you do that, the shock needs to be out. I'll just pull it out from there and go through the motions of the suspension, and then put the shock back in and tighten everything to spec. So wanted to show you a couple of things. These are the original spring pads. This is the bottom one. You can see how bad that is. And this is the top one that sits between the axle housing and the spring. And somewhere here, believe it or not, there's still the factory part number, 477818. I can't make out what the others are. FK something, but I couldn't find a part number on this one. Those are the spring pads. And if we go over here, you can see the condition of the bushings. That's the bushing up top. And when I took it out, this part stayed in the housing and would not budge. You can tell it's stuck in there. So that's the one that I had to get a C-clamp to push it out, and took a couple hours of working it back and forth. Finally got it to get out. So if the gas tank was not in its way, I would have just pressed it in from here, got a little extension with a socket on it and a hammer and just hammered it out. But since the gas tank was in the way, there was no room, so I had to improvise and come up with a C-clamp that just pushed it out barely. It was a small one too. It was like a 4-inch C-clamp, barely got it. So now I'm going to start taking apart the driver's side. I'll film that one a little bit because now I have an idea of what I'm doing. I didn't have an idea when I was doing the passenger side. So here we go. We'll start by taking the lower nuts off the shock. Mine is a Coney and those have 17mm nuts, so yours will vary depending on the shock. We'll have to take those 2 bolts out. They're 1/2-inch head bolts for the upper shock mounts. So once the shock is loosened up, now we can start with the spring. Make sure you have jack stands under the rear end and then also under the frame so you can support the car. And then start taking it apart. These the bolts for the bottom plate are 3/4. So I'll get the gun with the 3/4 socket and start getting at it. And then we'll move here. The front spring bucket has 3 bolts. 1, 2, and then there's a 3rd one in here hiding someplace. There it is. That's the 3rd one. I got lucked out on the other side. They came out very easily, so hopefully this side will be the same. You can see the bushings are rotted. I'm gonna show you here. You can see how the bushings are completely gone. So like I said earlier, I had a tough time getting those out. The top one especially. The bottom one comes out with the spring, so that's not a big deal. The top one is the key. Hopefully I can get it out easier than the other side, but we'll get there soon. I'm gonna start taking the bottom plate bolts, and you'll also make sure you have a jack underneath the leaf spring so it doesn't bounce down on you. We'll do the sway bar link, and that will free up the plate to drop. That all 4 bolts or nuts came free, so we're making good progress. For basically the car was rear suspension has never been apart. It's coming out pretty good. I did change the sway bar bushings like 30 years ago, so they've been at least the sway bar bushings have been out once, so those bolts are a little easier, but either way they're still old, so we'll take those out and then we'll start with the front spring eye pocket and then we'll move to the rear shackle. The plate out, the shock can come out. And there's the spring plate. Once you loosen up the sway bar and the shocks, there are T-bolts on the inside, and then be careful of the brake line, but there's the U-bolt here, and then there's another T-bolt here. That comes out. So the middle part of the spring perch is out. Now we move to the front. We get those 3 bolts out of there. See how it goes. 2 out of the 3 bolts came out. This one decided it didn't want to cooperate and just rotating inside. I think the clip inside is broken. So 2 ways, either gonna put pressure on it with this, push it down a little bit and get the bolt out that way, or when I drop the rear shackle, put some weight on it, get the bolt out that way. See what I can do. I'm starting to take the shackles out. It's an 11/16 nut. And like I said at the beginning of the video, the gas tank gets in the way. So there's the bolt head, and it has no room. There's like an inch, maybe inch and a half room for the bolt. So that means I have to take the top shackle out for the whole spring to come out, which is a pain in the neck. Hopefully that bolt will come out. That one, you can push the bolt out up top, and there's enough room in the back there between that and the rear fender for the bolt to slide out, hopefully easily, and the whole thing will drop. So again, if the gas tank was not there, you can just bang this bolt out, the spring will come down, and then you can take the top shackle out much easier, but whatever, you know. It is what it is, we'll make it work. So I'm gonna continue taking this nut out, and then we'll start with the top one, and then the whole thing drops. Once that drops, go back to the front spring pocket, the front bolt. Hopefully with enough weight on it, it will start backing out. So see how it goes. So both nuts are out. Again, if the gas tank was not there, I would have hammered that bolt out, but I gotta either C-clamp it out because it's in there. It's never been undone since it left the factory almost 50 years ago. So it's gonna be fun, just like the other side. I've either got to put a pry bar here and move it around, and then get my C-clamp and put it there and press it out, see what happens. So after struggling with it, got the upper shackle bolt out. I went with the Sawzall, because that thing was in there. But now the fun part comes in. As you can see, the bushings are in there, and they're in there pretty good. So probably gonna do like the last time, go in there and get as much of it as I can, and the rest of it I have to get the C-clamp again with a socket and start. Hopefully I can press it out and see what happens. This side came out easy. It's like a couple of minutes, and I was able with my pry bar to pry them out. So it's the first good thing that happened today on this setup. Anyways, onward. I'm just gonna clean the hole a little bit, get rid of all the dirt and stuff, and then continue on. Probably press the new bushings in, and then see if I can get the spring perch off, the old leaf springs, and then we'll restart the assembly. So the next issue we'll run into is the kit was supposed to come with the rubber bushings for the frame side of the shackle, so it will slide in easier, but it didn't. It came with poly bushings, and there is no way this thing is sliding in there. It's like less than a 1/16 of an inch difference between the diameter of this one and the original factory one, and there's just no way. It just will not. So what I did on the other side is I shaved a little bit of the outside diameter, just enough so I can press it in. So that's what I'm gonna do. Since I have the full factory ones that came out, I'll just show you the difference. Since the polys won't compress like the rubbers, it just will not go in there. So let's see. So here's the it's barely visible, and it's almost the same size, but the poly is slightly thicker. And so here, pressing the bushings in, I just got a long bolt and nut and some washers. I used the shackle plate on the empty side and just nut and bolt, and then pressing the bushing in. As the bolt tightens, obviously it's pushing the bushing in all the way, almost there, probably like 16th, less than a 16th, and it should get there. Once that's done, I'll take it out and press the other side, and then the bushings are ready, and then we'll start the reassembly. So we'll continue on. So pressed in the other side too, so the frame side bushings are both in and ready to go. So we're back at it this morning. I got the spring perch out. I had to sawzall the bolt because it was not budging. I think it's over the past 49 years or so, it's welded itself to the bushing. So hack it off, clean it up a little bit, give it a coat of paint, and then we'll start reassembling this new spring. So we're waiting for the paint to dry on the front spring perch and start reassembly. And from the 74 Pontiac service manual, the rear suspension, this gives the torque specs on the sway bar bushings and the links, and in here is the rear suspension, all the torque settings for the springs, the spring plate and the shackle end and the pocket end, and also the shocks. So I'm going to start with the sway bar because I painted those yesterday, the drop links, and then continue on as it dries up, then we can put the spring in. But if you guys want the torque specs per the factory, these are it. So we'll continue on. I just mounted the drop link upper mount and just put the drop link in there loosely for now, and then I'll mount the bushings there. The spring pocket is dried up, so I'm going to start assembling that one and then start putting the spring in. Put the perch back in the front eye. I got all new hardware for it because I had to cut the old one. So when you put it on, you're supposed to just install the bolt through the eye and have it loose. So when everything is installed, you're supposed to bounce the car up and down with the wheels on, so everything will settle. Then you tighten everything. So everything is loose, and now I'm gonna take the upper bracket that goes between the spring here and the axle, squeeze that in there, and then get the 3 bolts for here and mount this to the front, and then move on. The way it worked best for me was I put these on first, didn't tighten them, just screw them in, then put the middle U-bolts through the axle, and then went to the back shackle, and that's how it works. So I'll show you how I do it. Remember yesterday I was having trouble taking this front spring perch bolt out? Here's the reason. I had to take the old one out because the captured nut that was part of it had broken off. So luckily the kit I had came with 6 new captured nut fittings, but the others I chased them, they're all good, so I only had to replace one. So I just put the one in, and now we're ready to go. So now that I have the front spring perch loosely bolted in place, it's time to put the spring back in its place, the new spring. So the way it's gonna work is start from the front, then I'm gonna jack up the spring, put it in a spot here. I already put the rubber isolator on top. and then bolt it up. I'll get this sway bar out of the way so we can put that plate in, and then we'll jack it up and put it in the back. The way it worked for me is I had to put this outside plate in with the bolt. The top bolt at the frame goes from the rear fender side in. I didn't put it all the way in because I got to put the spring up and put it in the hole. It won't work. So in the other end, the bolt goes in from the gas tank side to the outside because it won't go in the other way. So once we get the center by the rear axle in, then I'll have to finagle that into place and bolt it up. It's not the easiest thing, but we'll get it done. This is where a second pair of hands will work. Additionally, the kit I got from Pro Touring F-Body came with 1/2-inch U-bolts. That means if you want to use those, you have to enlarge the holes both on the axle and on the plate to 9/16, so the bolts would go in, otherwise it won't go in, or you can use your factory hardware. I elected to use the new ones, so I ended up drilling the holes and enlarging them. Also same with the sway bar end link bracket. You have to enlarge them to fit the new 1/2-inch U-bolts. So now I'm going to put the jack underneath the spring, jack it up into place, and then go from there. See how it goes. So after much fighting with the spring in the car, I finally have the spring mounted. All the spring eye bolts are in, but they're loose because I gotta put the wheels on, put them on a flat surface, and then bounce the car up and down so the springs will get in their position correctly, and so there won't be any binding. I lubricated all the bolts. I tightened the center plate to the factory spec 40 foot-pounds, and then the front spring perch were at 25 foot-pounds, the 3 bolts that hold the perch into the body. The eye bolt, I haven't tightened it. The front eye bolt calls for 75 foot-pounds of torque, so once I bounce the car up and down, then after that I'll tighten it. Per the specs, instructions with the Pro Touring F-Body kit, it said not to install the shocks into the plate so you can bounce the car up and down. So that's why they're hanging right now. So we're almost there. One note, if your car likes you, everything will go in smoothly. If it hates you, like my car hates me because I've touched its 50-year-old hardware that I've never been off, then every step of the way was a fight. Even putting the bolts and the bushings and the up top, I had to literally put the socket set on it and turn it so the bolt would go in. So anyways, this has been a fight, but finally got it done. The sway bar bushings are in. One note on those, the aftermarket polyurethane bushings, the outside diameter is a little too big for the factory drop link. I don't know if the 75 and up are different design. Maybe that's what it was meant for, even though the spec called for 70 to 81. 70 to 74 has a different drop link design than the 70 to 75 to 81. But it's in there. Everything is tightened on the sway bar end, drop links and the ends. So now I'm gonna put the wheels on and then bounce the car up and down, and then put the shocks, tighten the eye bolts, and call this a project. And then the only thing left is the matching front shocks. I'm gonna swap those, and hopefully with the new suspension, the body levels out so the front left does not sag as we posted before. If that's the case, then I'll go back and swap the front springs to the matching Pro Touring GT Pro springs. Otherwise, if it's still crooked, then it's gonna go to the body shop and go on the frame machine and level it that way, and then put the subframe connectors, and then I can put the GT Pro springs in front coils. So I'm gonna put the wheels on right now and bounce the car and then call it a day. So the wheels are back on the car. Because of the width of the tires, I had to take the shocks completely out because they were hitting the rubber. So before I put the shocks back in, we're gonna bounce this thing a couple of times so the springs can sit themselves, and then tighten to the torque specs, take the wheels out, put the shocks back in, put the wheels back on, and then the rear end will be completely done. So let's see how it's gonna work. So gave it a few bounces. The springs are so stiff, it's not jumping up and down, but that's all right. The instructions calls for tightening the eye bolts while the wheels are on and the car's weight is on it. So that's what I'm gonna do now. Put the bolts back. Tighten the bolts to the specs that are in the manual. I think it's about 75 foot-pounds for the front, and I think the shackles are 40s, but either way, it's in the diagram. I'll look it up. Tighten those, jack the car back up, take the wheels out, put the shocks on, and then that's it. And then I might just go to the front and replace the shocks in the front, and then the car will be done for now. So see how it goes. Shocks are back on. I tighten up all the suspension, leaf spring, eye bolts, shackle bolts, everything. Bounced it up and down, tightened it, took the wheels back out, put the shocks back in, and then put the wheels back on. So the rear end is done, finally. So now it's gonna spend a few minutes now that I'm completely soaked and dirty. Might as well do the front shocks and call it a day. So thank you guys for following me. This has been a great adventure. I'm sure for some of you changing leaf springs is nothing special, but this was a tough one. So the moral of the story is, if you're gonna do leaf springs, take the gas tank out. That will make life so much easier. Everything will come out so much easier if the gas tank is not in the way, and have a second pair of hands. If you have those two, the job will go so much smoother than doing it with one person alone with the gas tank in place. So I'm gonna do the fronts. I already done this before, so I don't need to video them. So once I put those on, the weather is gonna be iffy today, so I can't take it out. So tomorrow, hopefully, if it's sunny, I'll take it for a spin and see how the car feels. So thanks a lot, guys, for checking the videos, and I'll catch you later. Bye. And here we have the separation between the seatbelt hump and the rear tire, with the car jacked up on the rear end. So it's, even with 9.5-inch wide wheels with 295 40 18s and the lowered suspension, it's still clearing the seatbelt hump. So we're all good. I drove it today, and the lack of slop from all the new bushings and suspension is just phenomenal. So I should have done this years ago, but anyways, better late than never. So I was worried about the tire rubbing against the seatbelt hump, but it's nowhere near. There's about 3/4 of an inch separation, so we should be good.